Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is exactly 10 o'clock. I have a read here which I need to share with you, and then we'll be joined by Bahle Sibanda, the chairperson and board of management of the Muslim AIDS program. 30 a.m. The meeting will take place virtually and a link will be sent to those who RSVP. Kindly RSVP on 011 373 8080 or 078 727 1334 or email on islamiccareline@gmail.com. Your attendance and support will be highly appreciated. And that, of course, is by the chairperson and board management of the Muslim AIDS program. So please diarize that date. It is 10 o'clock. News and views will be wrapping up with our final interview of the morning on this very cold winter morning where we've experienced snow after a very, very long time here in South Africa, or particularly in Johannesburg and parts of Gauteng. We're now going to be talking with political activist and student at WITS. She's also a writer and a poet. She is Bahle Sibanda. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you, Julie. I'm
Okay,
glad to
we're
be
going to
here.
Thank you. Thank you indeed for your time. And thank you for being here to explain to us what this new
Yes.
banking system for NSFAS funded students mean. How's it going to work? And how's
Yes.
NSFAS going to be protecting their funds? Because we are aware of that debacle where they had mistakenly transferred a very big amount of money into a particular student's account a long time ago, and she went on a crazy spending spree. We'll come back to that in a minute or two, but let's talk about the matter at hand.
Yes. So essentially, NSFAS has changed their banking system and basically outsourced the provision of allowances to external profit driven companies. And this, as compared to before, where they distributed the funds amongst universities, which would then like allocate them to the NSFAS students. But what these new banking companies, quote unquote, are, they're charging more for student accounts than the normal banks. For example, 29 Rand for monthly bundles versus the 10 Rand for normal banks, for what normal banks would charge, and 12 Rand for a 100 ATM withdrawal versus 7 Rand 50 per 1,000 for a normal bank. And many students have been left in misery, confusion, and really some have even been defunded. No allowances have been given out. And honestly, at this point, NSFAS doesn't even have an answer for students.
So, what is it that you guys are going to do as far as being a political activist yourself? I'm thinking about the students, the SRCs, for example, and the university administrators themselves, because clearly then this is not going to serve the students well at all, because every 10 rand means a lot to a student. It could probably
Yes.
mean one. And I know, I say this with deep respect. It might mean one meal a day. I know it's just 10 rand, but it
Yes.
could give them food for one meal a day.
So, as young activists, and especially as a socialist youth movement, what we're doing is that we are calling for basically a removal of the system that NSFAS has enacted, and also a reviewal of the system that incorporates the students. And when it comes to the SRCs, they've put out statements, and some of them, I think it's the EFF Student Command in multiple universities, has threatened to take to the streets because this is unacceptable. And if they do so, we will most likely be joining them.
It been put into action already, or are they still just in discussion phase? Which means
Yes,
that, you can still put a stop to it and you
yes.
guys can have discussions as to to map a way forward in everybody's best interest.
Yes, that's what we are calling for. But there have been like multiple reports that when students go to the offices, the NSFAS office in particular universities, I think it was with the Cape Peninsula University, they were told that they were waiting for communication from the banking companies. However, banking companies have not responded. Like Tenet has not given any feedback, and they haven't given any response time.
Where to from here then? Because it looks like you guys are in a catch-22 situation right now.
Honestly, I think the best way forward would just to keep calling for a removal of the system. And since there are multiple people on board, because many students are angered by this,
Of
they've
course.
been left, um, some of them are even facing threats of homelessness at this point. They don't know where they'll get their next meals, and they don't even have secure funding for second semesters. Like in WITS, we did a poll, and only 14 out of 213 students received allowance and funding, which means that the remaining students are left with no way forward. And because of that, I think it's on everyone's mind that we should stand up and say something against it and try and extract a response from people such as Bahle Sibanda, the NSFAS people, and yeah.
So, where do we stand right now as you and I speak? Is there going to be protest action that's going to go ahead, or are you waiting, hopefully waiting for a response from possibly NSFAS and the banking provider that they have chosen to service the NSFAS students?
On the topic of protest action, I wouldn't say I'm sure. Like I said before, there are multiple student activists that have called for protest action, and I we haven't really received any response. So I'm not sure if NSFAS or the banking companies are going to offer any responses at all. And if they do not, then it is highly likely that there are going to be protests, just as we saw earlier on in the year, where NSFAS had already left tons, thousands of students abandoned. That's This is a repetition of that situation, and I think if things go the way they're going with no communication whatsoever and with no retraction of the new banking system, it is likely that we will see student protests.
Have you given them a timeline? A NSFAS, that is.
No, as the Socialist Youth Movement, we have not yet given any timeline, but the EFF Student Command gave a timeline of a week, I think, and I'm not sure if they will receive any response from the NSFAS people.
When is the week up?
I think they let out this statement a couple of days ago, so probably somewhere this week. I could check, but
Okay, so for
I'm not
now,
sure.
it's a wait and see what happens.
Yes, everyone's waiting to see
Okay,
if
Bahle,
they will respond.
if it does come to that eventuality that the students do go the protest action route, I just hope and pray that they don't become destructive and destroy infrastructure on, en route regarding their protest. Because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, we're all being disadvantaged. Destroying
Yes,
infrastructure doesn't hurt a particular person or organization. You, I, our
yes.
children, our communities, we all suffer. So I hope that as an activist, you can put out a very strong word regarding that issue.
Yes, Julie. The thing is, with the protests that we saw earlier, and most student protests, it's only a minority that do any harm to property. And I think most of the time that is what is highlighted. When I was participating in the previous protests, there were barely any violent acts, there was barely any desecration of property. So I don't think that is something that we really have to put too much worry into. And yeah, I think when students take to the streets, it's mostly so that they are heard. And sometimes they might cause a bit of ruckus, but it's never to the point where it's a large disadvantage to everyone
Oh, we've
else.
seen, sadly, we've seen in the past where they have been very, very destructive, sadly. And then at the end of the day, it is a cost to the taxpayer and inconvenience to everyone concerned. We hear you, we feel for you, and we hope and pray this issue does get resolved. But once again, I urge all students and any trade union that take to the streets, please respect our infrastructure. The
Yeah.
country is reeling as it is. We don't need that to be added to our burden. Very, very quickly, I alluded to that student who had used up funds that were incorrectly transferred into her account.
Mhm.
Do we know the fate of her? Is she still a student? Has she been made to pay back the money? What's the story there?
Um, I'm not sure, Julie. I do not have an update on that, but I did hear that NSFAS was, in fact, accidentally putting quite a large sum of funds into some students' accounts, and um, some students not receiving anything at all. But I'm not really, I don't have solid I don't have a solid update on that situation, unfortunately.
Okay, we don't have any other, information regarding where certain students are being overpaid and some are being underpaid or not paid at all. We don't know if
Yeah.
that smells fishy, that if that means that there's something corrupt going on there. Maybe
Hmm.
we need to kind of investigate before we bring that story to our viewers and our
Yeah.
listeners. Let's leave it there. We do hope and pray that. There is a resolution on this matter. And you take care. Thank you indeed for bringing it to our attention. God bless.
Thank you for having me.
It is exactly 13 after 10 o'clock, time to wrap up. Thank you indeed for being part of the conversation, keeping us company for the past 2 hours. Or were you too busy enjoying the snow? All right, you can catch us later on one of our other platforms. Thank you for your time. Of course, we were running solo. Nasri Naidu, the producer, is off sick, so we wish you a speedy recovery. Thank you indeed to you, Abdul Salam, for running solo. Till tomorrow morning, take care on the roads. They're terribly slippery. Enjoy the snow. Keep warm. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.